The text message glowed on my phone screen. Heat up the leftovers in the fridge. Don't waste them. No hello. No thanks. Just a cold command from Tara, after she had taken the entire family except me, to celebrate her big promotion. 40 years I had given to this family. 10 years I had catered to my daughter-in-law's every whim. Something inside me finally snapped. I typed back a simple okay. Then I packed my bags, arranged the dining room perfectly, and walked out. What they found when they returned home changed everything forever. I remember the day Jeffrey brought Tara home to meet me. My son's eyes sparkled with a love I hadn't seen since he was a little boy, unwrapping Christmas presents. He was 30 then, handsome like his father, with the same crinkles around his eyes when he smiled. Frank had been gone for 2 years at that point, and I was still finding my way through the fog of widowhood. "Mom," Jeffrey said, his arm proudly around a slim brunette with intelligent eyes. "This is Tara." She extended her hand with a confidence that impressed me. "Mrs. Warner, I've heard so much about you. Jeffrey says you make the best apple pie in 3 counties. I laughed and pulled her into a hug instead of taking her hand. "Call me Alita, honey. Anyone who puts that look in my son's eyes is already family to me." That was 12 years ago. I thought I'd gained a daughter that day. For a while, it seemed I had. The early years of their marriage were lean ones. Jeffrey was trying to get his construction business off the ground, and Tara was working entry-level at Meridian Financial. They lived in a tiny apartment that barely fit their furniture, let alone their dreams. I still had the 4-bedroom family home that Frank and I had bought 30 years earlier. It made perfect sense when I suggested they move in with me. "Just until you get on your feet," I said, though secretly I was delighted to have company in the too-quiet house. They took the master bedroom, I insisted. I moved into the smaller bedroom that had once been Jeffrey's. It felt right somehow, that circular exchange of spaces. I told myself this arrangement was temporary, but when Tara announced she was pregnant just 6 months later, temporary stretched into something more permanent. Amy came into the world screaming her lungs out, a beautiful pink-faced bundle with Jeffrey's eyes. I fell in love instantly. When Tara had to return to work after 3 months of maternity leave, I was there with open arms. "I don't know what we'd do without you, Mom," Jeffrey said one evening, watching me rock Amy to sleep. "That's what family is for," I replied. When Lucas arrived 3 years later, our routine was well established. I cared for the children, while Tara and Jeffrey worked. I prepared meals, kept the house clean, and handled the day-to-day operations of our little domestic enterprise. It was exhausting sometimes, but also fulfilling. I felt needed, important. But things were changing beneath the surface. Tara was rising quickly at Meridian Financial, her sharp mind and determination propelling her through the ranks. Each promotion brought more responsibility, more prestige, and more money. Meanwhile, Jeffrey's construction business suffered setbacks. The economic downturn hit the housing industry hard. He began taking whatever jobs he could find, often for less than he deserved. The power dynamic in their marriage shifted gradually, then suddenly. Tara became the primary breadwinner. Jeffrey's confidence faltered. And somewhere in that transition, the way they treated me began to change too. It started with small things. My suggestions about the children were politely acknowledged, then promptly ignored. The meals I prepared were increasingly met with comments about being too heavy or too traditional. My collection of antique furniture that I'd lovingly restored over decades was referred to as all this old stuff whenever friends visited. "Mom's got a thing for junk shops," Jeffrey would say, with an indulgent smile that somehow made me feel both silly and ancient. I made excuses for them. They were busy, they were stressed, they were young and modern, and I was, well, not. The house that had once been unquestionably mine became increasingly Tara's domain. My family photos migrated from the living room to the hallway to eventually inside my bedroom. The kitchen where I'd cooked for 40 years now had gadgets I didn't know how to use and spices I couldn't pronounce. Still, I had my grandchildren. Amy with her serious questions about the world, and Lucas with his boundless energy. When they crawled into my lap for stories, everything else faded away. That Tuesday afternoon was ordinary in every way. I was helping Lucas with his kindergarten homework while Amy practiced piano in the living room. Jeffrey had left his tablet on the kitchen counter, and it pinged with a notification. Lucas, distracted as 5-year-olds often are, jumped up to see what it was. "Daddy got pictures," he announced, his small fingers tapping the screen before I could stop him. The screen filled with images that stopped my heart for a moment. There was Jeffrey in a suit I'd never seen, raising a glass. There was Amy in a pretty blue dress, and Lucas with his hair slicked down. There was Tara, radiant in red, standing to address a long table of smiling faces. I recognized Jeffrey's sister Debbie, and her husband, Tara's college roommate Stephanie, even Jeffrey's brother Thomas, who lived 3 states away. "When was this, sweetie?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "Yesterday," Lucas said proudly. "Mommy got a big new job, and we went to a restaurant with a fountain inside. I got to throw 3 pennies and make wishes. Yesterday, while I'd been home alone, thinking they were working late. While I'd eaten a sandwich in front of the television and waited up until 11 to make sure they got home safely. That looks like fun," I managed to say, but something cold and heavy settled in my chest. Lucas nodded enthusiastically. "It was, but the food was weird. Daddy said it was fancy, but I didn't like it." I swiped through more photos, each one a fresh wound. 36 pictures, and I wasn't in a single one. I hadn't even known there was anything to celebrate. I didn't mention the dinner. What would be the point? To tell my son and his wife that my feelings were hurt would only make me seem needy, grasping for attention. So, I stayed silent, swallowing the hurt like I'd swallowed so many small injuries over the years. But that dinner was a turning point, even if I didn't recognize it immediately. It was the first time I couldn't make excuses anymore. They hadn't forgotten to include me. They had actively chosen not to. Thanksgiving came 3 weeks later. I'd been preparing for it all month, planning the menu, shopping for ingredients, polishing my grandmother's silver that we used only for special occasions. Thanksgiving had always been my holiday. Even after Jeffrey and Tara moved in, they had respected that tradition. Until this year. "Mom, Tara's going to handle the turkey this year," Jeffrey informed me casually over breakfast. "She found this amazing brining recipe online." "Oh," I said, hiding my disappointment. "That's fine. I'll focus on the sides and pies then." But when Thanksgiving arrived, I found Tara had taken over the entire kitchen. She'd invited her parents, her sister, and 2 couples from her office. My contributions were relegated to a side table while her elaborate spread took center stage. "Alita," her mother Sandra said, helping herself to a tiny portion of my sweet potato casserole, "is this the recipe with marshmallows?" "How traditional." I smiled tightly. It was Frank's favorite. I've made it every Thanksgiving for 45 years. "Mom likes to stick with the classics," Jeffrey said, in that same indulgent tone that made me feel obsolete. That evening, after the guests had left and the dishwasher was humming, my neighbor Pat called. "How was the big day?" she asked. "Fine," I said automatically. Pat had lived next door for 20 years. She knew me too well to accept that. "Alita Warner, don't you find me? What happened?" Before I knew it, I was telling her everything. The dinner I hadn't been invited to, the Thanksgiving that had been taken over, the growing feeling that I was becoming invisible in my own home. "You know," Pat said when I finished, "we have a great group that meets at the community center on Thursdays. Book club, craft projects, sometimes just coffee and conversation. You should join us." "I can't," I said automatically. "I need to be here for the kids after school." "The kids have 2 parents, don't they?" "You're allowed to have a life too, Alita." But I made excuses and declined. My world had narrowed to the walls of this house, to being available whenever I was needed. The weeks passed, and the incidents accumulated. Jeffrey, who had once sought my advice on everything, now barely discussed any family decisions with me. When I mentioned that Amy seemed to be struggling with her math homework, he dismissed my concerns. Tara's handling it. She's got it all figured out with Amy's teacher. My 65th birthday came and went with only a hastily purchased card that still had the gas station price sticker on the back. Then came the day I discovered what had happened to Frank's retirement fund. My husband had been careful with money, setting aside a substantial nest egg before his heart attack took him at 60. I'd never touched the principal, living comfortably on my own pension and Social Security, knowing that money was there if I needed it. I was going through some paperwork when I noticed a bank statement I didn't recognize. When I opened it, I discovered a new account in both Jeffrey and my names that I'd never authorized. The statement showed a transfer of nearly $70,000, the bulk of Frank's retirement fund, 3 months earlier. When Jeffrey came home that evening, I was waiting. "What is this?" I asked, showing him the statement. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I was going to tell you about that. We needed capital for a development opportunity. It's a sure thing, Mom. I'll be able to pay it back with interest within a year." "You took my money without asking me?" "I didn't take it," he said, his tone defensive. "I borrowed it. And technically, Dad left it for both of us." "No, he didn't. He left it for me, to take care of me for the rest of my life. And we are taking care of you, aren't we? You live here rent-free. We feed you, This is my house," I interrupted, my voice shaking. "My house that I invited you into. My house where I cook most meals and provide free childcare and—" "Mom," he cut me off. "You're getting upset over nothing. The money's invested, not spent. And it's not like you need it right now anyway." I stared at my son, truly seeing him for perhaps the first time in years. This wasn't the boy I'd raised. Or maybe it was, and I'd just been blind to his flaws. The next day, I met Pat for coffee and told her what had happened. "You need to talk to a lawyer," she said firmly. "He's my son," I protested weakly. "And you're his mother, not his doormat," Pat replied. "At least get some advice so you know where you stand." That afternoon, I met Amy's friend Lily and her grandmother Nancy at school pickup. Nancy and I had exchanged pleasantries over the years, but never really talked. Today, something made me accept when she suggested we take the girls for ice cream. As the children chattered at their own table, Nancy and I found common ground. She too lived with her son and daughter-in-law. "It was rough at first," she admitted. "Carol saw me as interfering with everything. We had some real knockdown arguments." "How did you fix it?" I asked eagerly. "I stopped making myself small," Nancy said. "I stopped trying to be invisible and convenient. I started saying no when I needed to, started having my own life outside their home. Funnily enough, they respected me more for it." She patted my hand. "Standing up for yourself isn't selfish, Alita. Sometimes it's the only way to have real relationships instead of resentful ones." I was still pondering her words that evening as I prepared dinner. Tara and Jeffrey were in their home office, the door closed as they discussed something in low, intense voices. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but as I passed with a basket of laundry, Tara's voice rose. "We need to start looking at options, Jeffrey. She's becoming a burden." My son's response was too quiet to hear. "I know she's your mother," Tara continued, "but we need to think about our future. There are some very nice senior living arrangements that would give her more independence." I stood frozen, the laundry basket heavy in my arms. A burden. That's what I had become to them. The woman who had given life to Jeffrey, who had welcomed Tara with open arms, who had poured her heart and soul into caring for their children, was now just a burden to be managed. "Jeffrey, I need to talk to you." The words came out stronger than I felt the next morning as my son gulped down coffee before heading to a job site. "Can it wait, Mom? I'm already running late." "No, it can't." I sat down across from him at the kitchen table. "I overheard Tara yesterday, about me being a burden." Jeffrey's face flushed. "You misunderstood. We were talking about lots of things, future plans. Are you planning to move me into senior living?" He set down his coffee cup, not meeting my eyes. We're just exploring options, Mom. Nothing's decided. Options for me, without me. My voice remained steady, though my hands trembled slightly. I'm 65, not 85. I'm healthy, independent. I take care of your children every day. And we appreciate that. But, do you? Because lately, it feels like I'm just the convenient grandmother who lives in your house. It's not like that, Jeffrey protested, but his eyes slid away from mine again. Look, we can talk about this tonight, okay? I really have to go, but we didn't talk about it that night. Or the next. Jeffrey avoided being alone with me, and Tara was working late all week, preparing for her new role. The conversation hung between us, unfinished and festering. 2 weeks later, I needed a minor outpatient procedure. Nothing serious, just a small skin cancer removal on my shoulder. The doctor said I shouldn't drive myself home afterward because of the medication. I can take time off, Jeffrey offered when I mentioned it at dinner. No need, Tara said quickly. I'll schedule a car service. We both have important meetings that day. And so, I found myself alone in a taxi afterward, slightly woozy from the anesthetic, a bandage on my shoulder, and a hollow feeling in my chest that had nothing to do with the procedure. That evening, no one asked how it had gone. No one noticed the bandage peeking out from my shirt. They were too busy discussing Tara's upcoming business trip to Chicago. I retreated to my room early, finding unexpected comfort in the solitude. As I changed for bed, I caught sight of myself in the mirror, really saw myself for the first time in months. My silver hair was neatly styled, my posture still straight despite the decades. The face looking back at me was lined but strong, with clear blue eyes that had seen so much life. When had I started seeing myself as old? As diminished? When had I accepted their definition of who I was and what I deserved? The next day, while the house was empty, I pulled out photo albums from my closet. There I was at 30, holding baby Jeffrey. At 45, starting my job at the library after years as a stay-at-home mom. At 58, dancing with Frank at our 35th anniversary party, just months before his heart attack. There were other photos, too, ones that had once hung in the living room. Tara and Jeffrey on their wedding day, with me between them, all of us beaming. Amy's christening, with me holding her proudly. Family Christmas photos, where I sat surrounded by my loved ones, an essential part of the fabric of our lives. When had those photos disappeared from public view? I tried to remember if I'd been consulted or if they had simply vanished bit by bit as Tara redecorated. My reminiscing was interrupted by the doorbell. It was Nancy, Amy's friend's grandmother. I was in the neighborhood, she said, though I suspected that wasn't entirely true. Thought I'd check on you after your procedure. Pat mentioned it when we ran into each other at the market. I invited her in for coffee, touched by her thoughtfulness. We sat in the kitchen, talking about our grandchildren, our lives before them, our hopes. You know, Nancy said, I'm going to Paris next month. Paris? By yourself? She laughed. With my sister. We decided life's too short to wait for someday. Neither of us has seen the Eiffel Tower, and we're not getting any younger. I tried to imagine myself doing something so bold, so independent. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. Tara helped me prepare for the interviews that got her where she is today, I found myself saying. Did you know that? We practiced for hours. I put together her first professional wardrobe from thrift shops because they couldn't afford new. Nancy nodded, understanding what I wasn't saying. And now I'm a burden they're making plans to move into senior living. The words still stung to say out loud. And what do you want, Alida? Not what's convenient for them. What do you want? The question caught me off guard. What did I want? I'd spent so long accommodating others that I'd forgotten to ask myself. That question stayed with me over the following days as I watched Tara removing more of my touches from the house. My handmade quilts disappeared from the living room, replaced with sleek throws that matched her new color scheme. The vintage clock that had been my mother's vanished from the mantel. When I couldn't find it, I finally asked, Tara, have you seen my mother's clock? The one that was on the mantel? Oh, I put it in the attic, she said casually. It didn't really go with the new look, and it was always a few minutes off anyway. A familiar lump formed in my throat, but I swallowed it down. That clock is important to me. You can put it in your room if you want, she offered, as if bestowing a great favor. I retrieved the clock from a dusty box, wiping it clean with trembling hands. This was what I had been reduced to, my treasured possessions, my memories, hidden away because they didn't fit the new look. That Saturday, I finally accepted Pat's long-standing invitation to join her book club at the community center. I found myself among a dozen women near my age, discussing a novel about a widow discovering herself after her husband's death. We've all reinvented ourselves at some point, said the group leader, a vibrant woman named Dorothy. Some of us by choice, others by necessity. I left feeling lighter than I had in months. These women saw me, really saw me, as a complete person, with thoughts and feelings, not just as a convenient grandmother or an inconvenient burden. When I returned home, I made a decision. I would try one more time to bridge the growing gap between Tara and myself. I baked her favorite lemon squares and waited until Jeffrey had taken the children to soccer practice. "Do you have a minute to talk?" I asked, placing the treats and 2 cups of tea on the kitchen table. Tara looked up from her laptop with barely concealed impatience. "Can we make it quick? I have a presentation to finish." I sat down, pushing one of the cups toward her. "I've noticed things have been strained between us lately. I was hoping we could clear the air." She sighed, closing her laptop. "I appreciate the effort, Alida, but this isn't necessary. We're fine." "Are we?" "Because I feel like I'm disappearing in this house. My things are being packed away, my opinions don't seem to matter, and I recently learned you're discussing senior living options for me without my input." Tara took a sip of tea before answering. "I think you're being overly sensitive. This is just the natural evolution of family dynamics. It doesn't feel natural to be excluded from a family celebration dinner." A flicker of guilt crossed her face, quickly replaced with defensiveness. That was a work event that happened to include family. Lucas said Jeffrey's siblings were there. Even Thomas flew in from Denver. She waved dismissively. "Look, we're actually planning to discuss something with you tonight. Jeffrey wanted to wait, but since we're having this conversation," she straightened, slipping into what I recognized as her professional demeanor. "We're selling the house." The world seemed to stop for a moment. "This house? My house? Our house?" she corrected. "Your name is on the deed. Yes, but so is Jeffrey's since Frank's will. We've found a beautiful property closer to Meridian's headquarters. The commute is killing me, and the schools near the new place are much better rated. You're selling my home without discussing it with me first?" My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "We're discussing it now," Tara said, her tone maddeningly reasonable. "We've already started the process. The realtor thinks we can list next month. We've enrolled the kids in their new schools for next semester." The room spun slightly. Everything was decided, without me, as if I didn't matter at all. "What about me?" I finally managed to ask. "You'll come with us, of course," Tara said, as if it were obvious. "There's a nice mother-in-law suite with its own bathroom. You'll have more privacy." More privacy. A polite way of saying I'd be further separated from the family, tucked away in my own little space where I wouldn't interfere with their lives. "I see," I said quietly. Tara checked her watch. "Was there anything else?" "I really do need to finish this presentation." I stood up, legs unsteady. "No, that covers everything." That night, I couldn't sleep. The walls of my bedroom, the smallest room in the house that had once been mine entirely, seemed to close in around me. This house held 40 years of memories. Frank and I had brought baby Jeffrey home to this house. We had celebrated holidays, weathered storms, built a life within these walls. And now it would be sold out from under me, my opinion not even worth consulting. The next morning, I called Walter Peterson, who had been Frank's friend and our family lawyer for decades. "Alida," his warm voice brought an immediate comfort. "It's been too long. How are you?" "Not great, Walter. I need to talk to you about the house. We met for coffee that afternoon. I laid out everything. The changing family dynamic, the money Jeffrey had borrowed, and now the plans to sell the house. Walter listened without interrupting, his kind face growing increasingly concerned. Frank was very clear in his will, he said when I finished. The house was left to you, with Jeffrey as a co-owner, only in the event of your death or if you chose to add him to the deed. Did you ever make that change? No, I admitted, though I've been treating the house as if it belongs to all of us. Legally, it's still yours, Walter confirmed. They cannot sell it without your consent. A small weight lifted from my shoulders. At least I had this one piece of control. There's something else, I said hesitantly. I found some paperwork. Jeffrey's been looking into home care facilities near this new house they want to buy. Walter's bushy eyebrows drew together. Without discussing it with you? I nodded, embarrassed somehow, as if my son's behavior reflected poorly on my parenting. Alida, Walter said gently, what do you want? Not what's easiest for them. What do you want for your future? It was the second time in recent weeks someone had asked me that question. And for the second time, I had no ready answer. That evening, alone in my room, the stress of the situation finally caught up with me. My chest tightened, my breathing became shallow, and a wave of dizziness washed over me. For a terrifying moment, I wondered if I was having a heart attack like Frank. I managed to call Pat, who came over immediately and recognized the symptoms of an anxiety attack. She sat with me, coaching me through breathing exercises until the worst passed. This situation is affecting your health now, she said firmly. Something has to change. After she left, exhausted but calmer, I opened my bedside drawer and pulled out a bundle of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. Frank's letters, written during a 6-month contract job overseas early in our marriage. I read them sometimes when I missed him most. One particular letter caught my eye. It had been written after we'd learned I was pregnant with Jeffrey. My darling Alida, Frank had written in his precise handwriting, knowing you're carrying our child while I'm so far away is the hardest thing, but it also fills me with hope for our future. Promise me something, that you'll live your life fully, not just for the baby or for me, but for yourself too. You have such spirit, such strength. Never let anyone dim that light in you, not even me, not even our child. Your happiness matters. Tears blurred my vision. Somewhere along the way, I had forgotten that promise. I had dimmed my own light, made myself smaller, convinced myself that my only value was in what I could give to others. The next morning, I called my sister Charlotte in Arizona. We'd never been especially close, and contact had become sporadic after Frank died. I'd been so focused on Jeffrey's family that I'd let other relationships wither. Alida? Charlotte sounded surprised to hear from me. Is everything okay? No, I admitted, but I'm working on it. We talked for over an hour. I told her everything, and she listened without judgment. You know you always have a place with me if you need it, she offered. Thank you, I said, meaning it. But I think I need to stand on my own 2 feet first. Later that week, I learned from Amy that Tara's promotion celebration dinner was scheduled for Friday night at the Elite Steakhouse downtown. The whole family would be attending, along with Tara's colleagues and extended family members who were flying in for the occasion. Jeffrey approached me Thursday evening while I was helping the children with homework. Mom, we need you to watch the kids tomorrow night. I looked up in surprise. I thought they were going to the dinner. He looked uncomfortable. Change of plans. It's going to run late, and we thought it would be better if they stayed home. I see, I said quietly. So you need me to babysit while everyone else celebrates. It's not really a celebration, Jeffrey said defensively. It's mostly a work thing. With your brother and sister attending? With Tara's parents flying in from Florida? He shifted uncomfortably. Look, can you watch them or not? If it's a problem, I can try to find someone else. I studied my son's face, the boy I'd raised, the man he'd become. In that moment, I made my decision. No problem, I said. I'd love one more evening with Amy and Lucas. Jeffrey looked relieved, completely missing the significance of my words. Great. Thanks, Mom. That night, I made the children's favorite dinner. Homemade macaroni and cheese with little hot dogs cut into it, just as I'd made for Jeffrey when he was small. We played board games and built a blanket fort in the living room. I told them stories about their father as a boy, about their grandfather, whom Lucas had never met. I held them close, memorizing the feel of their small bodies against mine, the smell of Lucas's shampoo, the sound of Amy's laugh. When they fell asleep, I slipped out to the home office computer. Jeffrey rarely logged out, and I easily accessed his email. There, in black and white, was confirmation of what I'd suspected. Detailed plans for a mother-in-law apartment behind their new house, where I would continue to provide free childcare while maintaining my independence. Independence. Such a pretty word for isolation. There was also correspondence with a real estate agent about listing the house, my house, next week. They hadn't even told me the timeline had moved up. Something hardened inside me. Not anger exactly, determination. I'd given everything to this family. My time, my energy, my home, even my identity. And in return, I was being treated as an afterthought, a burden to be managed, a resource to be used. No more. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I planned. First, I called Walter and explained what I needed. Despite the late hour, he listened patiently. "Are you sure about this, Alita?" he asked when I finished. "I've never been more sure of anything. Then I'll have the papers ready by morning." Next, I called Pat, who answered groggily, but became fully alert as I outlined my plan. "It's about time," she said. "What do you need from me?" "A place to stay for a few days, until I can find something permanent." "You've got it. My guest room is yours for as long as you need." I spent the rest of the night carefully sorting through my possessions. The jewelry Frank had given me over the years. Photo albums, important documents, my mother's recipes written in her flowing script, the small treasures that defined my life. At first light, I visited my bank. The manager was an old friend who helped me open a new account in my name only and transfer the remainder of my personal savings, money I'd inherited from my parents years ago and kept separate from the family accounts. It wasn't a fortune, but it would be enough to start over. Next, I met Walter at his office to sign papers, protecting my ownership interest in the house and documenting the loan Jeffrey had taken from Frank's retirement fund. "I've also prepared this," Walter said, sliding a letter across his desk. "It outlines your legal rights regarding the house and requests that any discussion of its sale include you as the primary owner." I added a handwritten note to the bottom. "Jeffrey, I've always tried to do what's best for you. Now I need to do what's best for me." My final stop was at Dean's apartment complex, where Pat had mentioned there were reasonably priced one-bedroom units available. The manager showed me a small but clean apartment on the second floor, with a tiny balcony overlooking a courtyard garden. "It's nothing fancy," she apologized. "It's perfect," I said, and wrote a check for the deposit and first month's rent on the spot. Back at the house, I called the moving company I'd researched online. They had an opening that very evening, a cancellation that seemed like fate. I scheduled them to arrive at 7:30, knowing the family would be well into their dinner by then. As evening approached, I watched Jeffrey and Tara dress for the celebration. Tara wore a striking black dress that highlighted her slender figure. Jeffrey struggled with his tie until I stepped forward to adjust it, just as I had done for his father countless times. "Thanks, Mom," he said absently, already focused on the evening ahead. "Have a wonderful time," I said, meaning it despite everything. Whatever had happened between us, I still wanted happiness for my son. They left at 6:15. The children already fed and settled in to watch a movie. I tucked them in early, kissing their foreheads with extra tenderness. "I love you both so much," I whispered. "Never forget that." Once they were asleep, I moved quickly. From the attic and basement, I gathered the furniture that had been mine before Jeffrey and Tara moved in. Pieces Frank and I had collected over our marriage. My antique restoration projects, family heirlooms. Nearly half the furnishings in the house, all carefully documented in photos I'd taken earlier. When the moving team arrived, they worked efficiently and quietly under my direction. Into the truck went my bedroom furniture, my great-grandmother's china cabinet, Frank's reading chair, the dining table we'd bought on our 10th anniversary. While they worked, I transformed the dining room. I covered the table, the new one Tara had bought to replace mine, with my finest linen tablecloth. I set it with my grandmother's china and crystal, pieces too precious to use regularly, but perfect for special occasions. In the center, I placed a small crystal vase with a single rose from the garden. Beside each place setting, I left something meaningful. For Jeffrey, his father's pocket watch. For Tara, the pearl earrings I'd worn at my own wedding and had planned to give her on better terms. For the children, small treasures that would remind them of me. A polished stone from our beach trip for Lucas, a delicate music box for Amy. Finally, at each place, I left letters I'd written during the night. Pages of love and hurt and hope, not accusations, but truths too long unspoken. In the center of the table, I placed the legal documents Walter had prepared, along with the deed to the house showing my ownership, and bank statements documenting the money Jeffrey had taken. On top of these, I left the keys to the house and a final note. I have established college funds for Amy and Lucas. The details are in the envelope. This is not goodbye forever, but I need time to find myself again. My new phone number is below. When you're ready to talk, really talk, I'll be waiting. The movers finished just before 10. They followed me to my new apartment, unloading the essentials for that night. My bed, a chair, basic kitchen items. The rest would go into storage until I found a permanent place. As I signed the moving invoice, a text message appeared on my phone, from Tara. Heat up the leftovers in the fridge. Don't waste them. No questions about the children. No thank you for watching them. Just another command, as if I were the household help rather than family. My fingers hovered over the screen. So many responses came to mind. Angry, hurt, sarcastic. Instead, I simply typed, "Okay." Then I turned off my phone, handed the movers a generous tip, and closed the door on my new apartment. My new life. For the first time in years, I was answering only to myself. The feeling was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. That first night in my new apartment was strange. The unfamiliar creaks and sounds of the building kept me awake. The bed felt right. It was my bed, after all. But everything else felt temporary, unfinished. I alternated between absolute certainty that I'd done the right thing and crushing doubt that I'd destroyed my relationship with my family forever. When morning came, I turned my phone back on. It immediately exploded with notifications. 23 missed calls from Jeffrey. 15 text messages ranging from confused to frantic to angry. 2 voicemails from Tara that I couldn't bring myself to listen to yet. I texted Jeffrey only. "I'm safe. I need time." Then I turned the phone off again. Pat came by mid-morning with groceries and moral support. "How are they taking it?" she asked. "I don't know exactly. There have been a lot of calls and messages, but I'm not ready to engage yet." She nodded approvingly. "Good. Let them sit with what they've done. Sometimes silence speaks louder than any words." 3 days passed. I settled into a routine in my new space. It was small, yes, but every item in it was mine, chosen by me, placed where I wanted it. There was a freedom in that simplicity that I hadn't expected. On the 4th day, my sister Charlotte arrived from Arizona, having immediately booked a flight when I told her what had happened. "Look at you," she said, embracing me tightly. "Standing up for yourself after all these years. I'm proud of you, big sister." Charlotte's presence was both comfort and courage. We spent the days exploring the city as if I were a tourist, visiting museums I'd always meant to see, trying restaurants I'd always meant to try. In the evenings, we talked more openly than we had in decades. "I always envied you," Charlotte confessed one night. "Your perfect family, your beautiful home." I laughed without humor. "Not so perfect, it turns out. No family is. But that doesn't mean you deserve to be treated that way." A week after I'd left, Walter called to inform me that Jeffrey had contacted him about selling the house. I explained that you're the primary owner and no sale can proceed without your explicit consent, Walter said. He seemed surprised. He never bothered to check the deed, I said, shaking my head. Just assumed he had the right to sell my home out from under me. Do you want me to negotiate with him directly? About buying out your share? I considered it. Not yet. I'm not ready to make any permanent decisions. The following day, I finally answered one of Jeffrey's calls. Mom? His voice was rough, as if he hadn't slept well. Where are you? Are you okay? I'm fine, Jeffrey. I'm staying with a friend. You can't just disappear like that. We've been worried sick. The kids are asking for you constantly. I left a note explaining everything, I said calmly. And contact information. But why? What's going on? Is this about the house? Because we can talk about that. Now, you want to talk? I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. After decisions were already made? After plans were set in motion without consulting me? Mom, please. Just come home so we can sort this out. That's not my home anymore, Jeffrey. You and Tara made that very clear. Of course it's your home, he protested. We want you with us. As what? The convenient grandmother tucked away in a separate apartment? The free childcare provider? The burden you need to manage? His silence told me more than words could have. I need time, I said finally. I'll call to speak with the children later this week. 2 days later, I had a surprisingly civil phone conversation with Amy and Lucas. They were confused and upset by my absence, but I assured them I loved them very much and would see them soon, just not at home. Are you mad at Daddy and Mommy? Amy asked perceptively. Not mad, sweetheart, just sad. Sometimes grown-ups need space to work through sad feelings. Like when I go to my room when I'm upset? Lucas offered. Exactly like that, I said, smiling through tears. After that, I established a routine of calling the children every other day. Sometimes Jeffrey or Tara would try to get on the line, but I kept these conversations focused solely on my grandchildren. Meanwhile, Charlotte returned to Arizona, but Pat kept me updated on neighborhood gossip. According to her sources, primarily her husband, who golfed with Jeffrey's friend, my son was struggling. With me gone, the household that had run so smoothly for years was in chaos. Jeffrey had taken time off work to handle childcare. Tara's carefully plotted career trajectory was threatened by family complications she hadn't anticipated. Serves them right, Pat said with satisfaction. But I took no pleasure in their difficulties. Despite everything, they were still my family. I just couldn't sacrifice myself for them anymore. 3 weeks after I'd left, I started a part-time job at Sullivan's Antiques downtown. The owner, Margaret, was a sprightly woman in her 70s who appreciated my knowledge of furniture restoration. Most people don't understand the difference between real craftsmanship and mass-produced junk, she said approvingly, as I correctly identified the period of an oak sideboard. The work was a revelation. For years, my hobby of furniture restoration had been dismissed as Mom's thing for old junk. Now, I was being paid for that knowledge, respected for that skill. Customers sought my opinion. My confidence, dormant for so long, began to bloom again. One afternoon, I returned from work to find Amy sitting on the steps outside my apartment building, a school backpack beside her. Amy, I gasped, hurrying toward her. What are you doing here? Does your father know where you are? She shook her head, looking both defiant and scared. I took the bus. Lily's mom told me where you live. I ushered her inside, my heart pounding. Sweetheart, your parents must be frantic. We need to call them right away. Please don't make me go back yet, she pleaded, her eyes filling with tears. Everything's awful at home. Daddy and Mommy fight all the time. Lucas got in trouble at school for hitting another kid. And Mommy's always angry because she has to keep missing work stuff. I called Jeffrey immediately, assuring him Amy was safe with me. He arrived 30 minutes later, disheveled and frantic. The sight of my son, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, clothes wrinkled, sent a pang through my heart. Whatever had happened between us, he was still my child. Thank God, he said, embracing Amy tightly. "Don't you ever scare me like that again." When he finally looked up at me, his expression was a mixture of relief, anger, and something else I couldn't quite identify. Respect, perhaps. "Can I talk to you?" he asked. "Alone?" Amy went into the bedroom to watch TV, and Jeffrey and I sat at my small kitchen table. "Is it true what Amy said about things being difficult at home?" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father that my breath caught. "Everything's falling apart, Mom. Tara's missing important meetings because of the kids. I've had to turn down jobs. We're fighting constantly. The house is a mess. No one can find anything. Even the dog seems depressed." Despite everything, I felt a flicker of satisfaction that I hadn't been as replaceable as they'd thought. "I'm sorry you're struggling," I said, and meant it. "Then come home," he urged. "We need you." I shook my head slowly. "That's the problem, Jeffrey. You need what I do for you, not me. There's a difference." "That's not true," he protested, but weakly. "When was the last time you asked me about my day? My interests? My feelings? When was the last time you saw me as a person, not just your mother or the children's grandmother?" He had no answer. "I'm not coming back," I said gently. "Not to the way things were. I deserve better than that." "So you're just abandoning us? Abandoning the kids?" "No. I'm finding myself again, and setting boundaries that should have been set long ago." As he left with Amy, who extracted a promise from me to visit soon, I saw my son glance around my small apartment with new eyes, seeing not just its modest size, but the dignity with which I'd arranged it, the independence it represented. After another week of consideration, I agreed to meet Jeffrey at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. I arrived early, selecting a table by the window where sunlight streamed in, warming my shoulders. When Jeffrey entered, I barely recognized him. He looked haggard, older somehow, the weight of recent weeks evident in his posture. Yet when he saw me, a genuine smile transformed his face. "Mom," he said, pulling me into a tight hug before sitting across from me. We ordered coffee and sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Jeffrey finally said, "about how I treated you." I waited, giving him space to continue. "I took you for granted," he admitted, staring into his coffee. "Worse than that. I stopped seeing you as a person with your own needs and feelings. I just saw what you could do for us." "Yes," I said simply. "When you left." His voice broke slightly when I saw that dining room set up so beautifully, with Dad's watch and all those letters. It was like seeing you clearly for the first time in years. Really seeing what we'd done. "And what had you done, Jeffrey?" He met my eyes directly. "We pushed you aside, made you feel unwelcome in your own home, excluded you from family events, planned your future without consulting you, treated you as less than." Tears pricked at my eyes. It was everything I'd felt, but couldn't articulate. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I don't have any excuse. I got caught up in Tara's vision of our life, her plans. I forgot whose son I was." "And Tara?" I asked carefully. He sighed. "Tara's struggling. With guilt, with practical realities, with her job. She was passed over for the senior position because she couldn't commit to the travel schedule without you there to help with the kids." He looked down. "She's not ready to admit her part in this yet. But she's getting there." "I see. The thing is, Mom, we do need you. But not in the way I thought before. We need your wisdom, your perspective. The kids need your love. I need my mother." He reached across the table to take my hand. "But you were right to leave. We didn't deserve you." The simple acknowledgement broke something open inside me. All the hurt, all the anger, all the grief I'd been carrying, not gone, but lighter somehow. "What happens now?" I asked. "That's up to you," Jeffrey said. "I'd like us to try family counseling, all of us, including the kids. I've found someone who specializes in multi-generational family dynamics." I was surprised. "That's very thoughtful." "I've been doing research," he admitted sheepishly, "trying to understand how we got here." We talked for over 2 hours, about boundaries and expectations, about the house. Jeffrey apologized for attempting to sell it without my permission and promised to repay the money he'd borrowed. About the future. Mine, his, our families. I don't want to move back in, I said firmly. I need my own space now. I understand, he nodded. What about visiting rights for your grandchildren? I smiled at his phrasing. I'd like that very much. Over the following weeks, we established a new pattern. I visited the house twice a week for dinner, and to spend time with Amy and Lucas. Jeffrey brought them to my apartment on Saturdays, where we baked cookies or worked on craft projects. Tara remained cool at first, polite but distant. The loss of the promotion had hit her hard, and I knew she partly blamed me, however unfairly. The breakthrough came 6 weeks after my departure. I was showing Amy how to use a sewing machine I'd bought at a yard sale when Tara arrived to pick her up. Instead of waiting in the car as usual, she came up to the apartment. That looks complicated, she commented, watching Amy's careful concentration. Grandma's teaching me to make a pillow, Amy said proudly. For my room. Your grandmother taught me to sew too, Tara said unexpectedly. Did you know that, Amy? Before your daddy and I got married. Amy looked between us with surprise, and I felt an equal shock. It was the first time Tara had acknowledged any of our shared history since I'd left. After Amy gathered her things, Tara lingered. Could we talk? She asked, a vulnerability in her voice I'd rarely heard. We sat at my kitchen table, the same one where I'd talked with Jeffrey weeks earlier. I need to apologize, Tara said stiffly, for how I treated you, for taking you for granted. The words sounded rehearsed but sincere. Thank you, I said. That means a lot to me. I didn't realize. She paused, struggling. How much you did for us. How much we depended on you. Not just the practical things, but everything. I nodded, waiting. I've been talking to my own mother, Tara continued. She pointed out that someday I'll be the mother-in-law. That someday I might be treated the way I treated you. She looked down. I wouldn't want that. It wasn't a profound revelation, but it was honest. And it was a start. Would you be willing, she asked hesitantly, to help me find a balance between work and family? You always made it look so easy. I laughed softly. It was never easy, Tara. But I'd be happy to share what I've learned. We began family counseling the following week. It was uncomfortable at times, painful at others, but always illuminating. The therapist, Dr. Lawson, helped us articulate feelings we'd never expressed, establish boundaries we'd never defined. 3 months after I'd walked out, Walter called with news. A developer was interested in a plot of land adjacent to my house, land that was included in my property deed but had been unused for decades. Their offer was substantial, enough for you to buy a comfortable place of your own and still have a generous nest egg, Walter said. I discussed it with Jeffrey and Tara. Instead of the resistance I expected, they supported the idea. It's your land, Mom, Jeffrey said, and you deserve security. With the proceeds, I purchased a lovely 2-bedroom townhouse just 10 minutes from their home. Close enough for regular visits, far enough for independence. My job at the antique store expanded to full-time as Margaret prepared for semi-retirement. You've got an eye for this business, she told me. I'd like you to take over more of the purchasing decisions. At 66, I was embarking on a new career. The irony wasn't lost on me. As the months passed, our family found a new equilibrium. Tara scaled back her work ambitions slightly, prioritizing time with the children. Jeffrey's construction business improved as the economy recovered. The children thrived with our more intentional family structure. 1 year, after my abrupt departure, we gathered at my townhouse to celebrate my 66th birthday. Everyone contributed to the meal, Jeffrey grilling, Tara bringing a salad she'd learned to make, the children creating homemade cards. Even Tara's parents came, Sandra bringing a sweet potato casserole with marshmallows as a peace offering. As we sat around my new dining table, smaller than the old one but big enough for family, I looked at the faces gathered there. Imperfect people who had hurt each other, who had failed each other, but who were trying to do better, who were seeing each other clearly, perhaps for the first time. "I'd like to make a toast," Jeffrey said, raising his glass. "To Mom, for having the courage to teach us one of life's hardest lessons, that love without respect isn't really love at all," Tara added softly. "And to family. Not the perfect kind we pretend to be, but the real kind that makes mistakes and learns from them." As glasses clinked and smiles were exchanged, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Not because everything was perfect, it wasn't. Not because all hurts were healed, some scars would always remain, but because I had finally learned that standing up for myself wasn't selfish. It was necessary. Not just for me, but for all of us. Sometimes the greatest act of love is having the courage to say, "I matter too." Have you ever had to stand up for yourself with family, even when it was painful? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's never too late to rewrite your own story.